Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Hello there, listeners of Steering Change. It is I, your host, Kelsey Hipkin, and today we bring you episode 2 of our Road to Wellness series. In our last episode, we covered some different modes of technology that are helping keep drivers safe when traveling alone. And we would love to hear from you for what technology you might be using to stay well on the road out there. Fun fact, for part 2, we are here recording 2 days before Halloween, so let's get a little spooky. For some, ghosts and goblins can be scary. However, for me personally, it's diet and exercise that have me peering around doorways to see what might be lurking in the produce section or the local gym. And when it comes to our commercial drivers who spend a lot of time sitting behind the wheel, climbing in and out of trucks, and working with loading and unloading products and services, diet and exercise might not always be at the forefront. In 2020, a study conducted by Crizzle, Miracini, Bigelow, Schubar, Zello, and TIFO for the Government of Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Branch, titled Improving the Health and Working Conditions of Long-Haul Truck Drivers, cited, and this was out of 238 participants, that 89.5% were overweight, 16% were diabetic, 36.2% were stressed, and 40% were depressed. I get that 238 can be a small sample size, but as everyone here knows, drivers are paramount to ensuring goods get to where they need to go 24/7. Now, the study I mentioned did cover a lot of information, so we will be sharing it in the show notes. But with today's podcast, we wanted to help change the narrative and provide some tangible and driver-friendly takeaways for improved health behind the wheel. And to share in that, I am joined today by AMTA Senior Advisor, Member Solutions, Health Guru, and Road to Wellness co-host Doug Walton, as well as physical therapist, health guru, and overall expert in commercial driver health, Dr. Mark Manera. Doug, Mark, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Mark, I'm going to kick off with yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, first off, I don't normally go by health guru, so I try to stay away from that one. I'm not making anyone float or any namastes over
For our
here,
listeners
okay?
out there, that was solely on the host who wrote that in.
I'm joking. But yeah, so my background's pretty interesting, and it's interesting because I think when you talk to people in trucking, there's kind of two ways that you can get into trucking. Either somehow you're like fourth generation and like diesel's in your blood, or you say you just fell into it and I kind of can't get out now. And I kind of fall into that category, but I come from a unique background, as in I come from healthcare. And I have a doctorate degree in physical therapy, and I got into the trucking industry about 5 years ago when a bunch of truck drivers walked into the clinic that I was working at. And it was like the first time I got to know some drivers on a personal level. And it was also the first time I saw what 20, 30 years behind the wheel can do to someone's health. And it just threw me down this rabbit hole, the trucking industry. And like, I'm a little bit of a research nerd, and just like diving into the trucking industry, the health of drivers, some research, and actually haven't ran into the study that you mentioned earlier. So I was really interested when you sent that over to me, and I want to talk more about it today. But when I read the statistics initially about just the health of drivers, I was shocked at what I saw of like highest rates of obesity and diabetes among any other occupation in the United States. And the thing that still strikes me to this day, every time I say it, and it is, I'm a very mission-driven person, and it's really, in my opinion, my mission of what I'm doing in my career, is the fact that truck drivers die 16 years earlier than the average American. This is a study out of America, and my intuition says it's not too different up in Canada, especially after reading that study that you just mentioned. But in America, a commercial truck driver's life expectancy is 61 years old. 61 years old. Like, and to me, like, I'm going to try to stay away from saying curse words, but that's really messed up. You can add in whatever curse word you want to add to that, because it's needed there. And I just really don't think anyone's career should define their health. And as I've gotten deeper and deeper into trucking, that's exactly what's happening. And these drivers have such a unique lifestyle. There's so many unique barriers that they face. And the issue that I've seen in the industry as a whole, and talking to companies, talking about the insurance level, and I know insurance is, especially health insurance, is a little weird up in Canada, or maybe it's a little weird up in the United States. I come from the US, so whatever you want to say. But what I've recognized is that all of the health benefits that trucking companies have available to offer to their employees, if it's on the wellness side of things, if it's just a part of the health insurance that the Canadian government gives you, they're all built for someone who works in a cubicle and then handed to a driver as an afterthought. And they don't fit the lifestyle. They don't understand the culture of the industry. They don't speak driver's language. And health is personal. It always has been, it always will be. And if a driver does not resonate with a health benefit or a health program that you try to initiate or a wellness program you try to initiate, they're just not going to use it. They're going to like smell BS immediately. And what I've seen time after time, and it's why so many people, and I try to keep the word wellness out of my vocabulary. It's kind of like Voldemort for me. I try not to use it because it has such a negative connotation in the trucking industry when you talk to executives, because they all have a sour taste in their mouth because everything they've tried in the past is clearly built for being sold to a software engineer or a lawyer down the street and not designed around trucking or the lifestyle of a driver. And it's just completely fallen flat. Most of them collect more dust throughout the year than actual usage, and no one uses them. And if no one's using them, we're not changing any stats, we're not getting anyone healthier, and we're also not creating an ROI or reducing any risk from a health-related perspective for the company. And so for me, I came into the industry and started Offshift, my company, very, very much focused of how do we design a digital health program specifically for trucking and specifically around the lifestyle of the driver and become the most engaged health benefit that a trucking company can offer. Because if we get drivers engaged, we keep them engaged, 99% of the time, they get healthier afterwards. Because if you're moving more, you're eating healthier, you're doing all these different lifestyle changes, the health outcomes are going to follow. And so that's kind of how I got into the industry and what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And a ton of touch points there that I know Doug is going to delve into in just a minute. But Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Sure. Thanks, Kelsey. For our Steering Change listeners, back again, my name is Doug Walton, and I'm the Senior Advisor of our Member Solutions team here at the AMTA. Really, I'm privileged to be working with an amazing group of people here at our association, and that includes you, Kelsey, who are all about supporting our members as they travel along their journey in transportation. So really glad to be here, and I'm looking forward, just with Mark's comments, diving into this conversation here today and getting into it. So
thanks for the flattery, Doug. I will pay you later. But for now, why don't you kick off with a few questions about Mark and his expertise with driver health?
Sure. Dr. Mark, thanks so much for being here. It's great to have you on the Road to Wellness series, my friend. And I know as I follow you and I look at your schedule, I know you're super busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. And before we get started, I wanted to take a moment just to celebrate you and the work that you do. It's truly inspiring. Often we focus on how to do things safely, yet we sometimes miss talking about our health, and our health can interfere with our ability to be safe sometimes, and that could also contribute to the risk in our workplace. So glad to have you here and looking forward to diving right in. We shared a little earlier about your career and how you, as a physiotherapist, you kind of took a bit of a shift and you noticed some trends, obviously, with those patients coming in from our industry. Can you just talk about those trends and walk us through that journey a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, like the initial starting point of the handful of drivers that came in when I got started in all of this, I wouldn't say there was so much volume of drivers came in where I all of a sudden got all these trends and I'm like, this is what sparked it. It was really the initial driver that came in that started this whole thing was 37 years as an over-the-road truck driver. He hobbled in. He was less than 24 hours after a total knee replacement. He was still like loopy on pain medicine, kind of like on crutches, hobbling in all wonky. And I was his physical therapist, and we just hit it off from day one. I mean, like those people where it's like immediately start talking to them and you're like, we've been friends for 20 years types of situation. You can just kind of talk to it. And that was how him and I were. And he just told me so many stories about life on the road, how much he loved trucking, the amount of sacrifice he had to do to be an over-the-road trucker as a father of 5, and just some hilarious, probably like big fish stories of his life out on the road. And we just hit it off. And one of the things that when I'm talking to any patient, especially anyone who had a total knee replacement, one of the questions I'm asking after a surgery or recovering from an injury is, hey, what were you doing for physical activity or exercise before this event happened? And where do you want to get back to, right? Because we want to get them back to either doing what they were doing previously or, doing more than they were doing even previously. And the typical person who I ask that is like, oh, I do X, Y, and Z. Or if they're maybe not the most physically active person, they're like lean back a little bit and says, oh yeah, my doctor asked me that. I get it. I need to be doing something more than that. But this guy, I asked him like, hey, what were you doing for exercise out on the road? And he just made straight eye contact with me and just bursted out laughing and said, I'm a trucker. We don't do that. It was really funny in the moment, but it was like one of those first times from my perspective, and I have continued to see this trend where there was this cultural identity of a driver that being healthy, exercising, eating healthy out on the road is not possible. And as I've gotten deeper into the industry, I understand why there is this common trend in drivers, because so many drivers, I mean, if you think about it, on a daily basis, they are stuck looking down the microscope of, I am out away from my family. I get paid per mile I drive, and I need to go and maximize the amount of money I make today, because that's the only thing in my head that's going to rationalize why I'm sacrificing away from home, away from my kids. And so on a daily basis, they're maxing out their clock. They're doing as many miles as they can. They get done. They're mentally burnt out after the day. I go on a 5-hour road trip and all I want to do is lay down, veg out, and watch Netflix. And so they're doing this on a daily basis and they're burnt out. You mentioned some of the mental health, emotional health side of things. And then you also get to a truck stop in the middle of Canada where there's no gym to be looked at. And you walk in and there's a slice of pizza, maybe a roller dog and a Snickers bar. And it feels like the easy option is just to grab that, go back to my bunk. I'm going to scroll on TikTok for a couple of hours or maybe too many hours and then go to bed and do it all over again the next day. And it's this vicious cycle that can happen. And then these drivers, sometimes they get delayed or their schedule gets shifted around and they feel like they're in survival mode and they just can't catch up until they get on home time. Then by the time they're caught up at home time, it's ready to go back out on the road. And it's just like on and on and on and on and on. And then you add on top of that, all of the resources they've had available are not built around their lifestyle. It's built around someone who works a 9 to 5 in front of a computer in an office and is home every night. And it's like, I don't know how to fit this into my daily routine. I don't know when I'm going to fit it in. And I have no one there to help me because I feel alone in this situation. Mm-hmm. And I think this goes beyond just drivers, but I'll just speak on the drivers is 99% of drivers out there do not have anyone in their corner who's helping them with their health and is there understanding their lifestyle and really trying to personalize something and hold them accountable. Right? It's like this balance of knowing when to hold their hand and shove them forward, right? That's kind of the fun dance you do as a coach. But a lot of drivers don't have that person in their life.
No, for sure. And I love your enthusiasm and your passion for this. And those on a steering change can't see me nodding my head in agreement, but I've been there. I come from a driving background. So everything that you said there is so true. And we talk about those prolonged periods of sitting and those irregular schedules and those long work weeks. When I think back to my career in the industry and we looked at average hours of our drivers, we're 11 and a half, 12 and a half hour days. So 60 plus hour work weeks. What kind of health challenges just with that kind of sedentary type duty do you see that are going to be challenging as a result?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it trickles down from the obesity epidemic in the industry, right? 70% of drivers are obese. I think the study, Kelsey, that you mentioned was like 89% of drivers are overweight or obese. So the difference there is basically there's something called body mass index, which is this fancy equation between how much you weigh and how tall you are. And then there's this chart that everyone looks at and you get marked off. And if you're between 25 and 30 in a BMI, you're considered overweight. And if you're considered 30 over, you're considered obese. There's better ways to measure someone's metabolic health or health than BMI, but from a population health perspective, it's really good. It's very accurate when you start looking at hundreds and thousands of people. And what I've seen coming back to kind of the health issues is there's so much that trickles down from a driver being overweight or obese. There's diabetes, there's heart disease, hypertension, there's musculoskeletal work comp risk, There's fatigue risk when you're behind the wheel on a safety issue, and also a connection on the mental health side of things, right? I always say mental health and physical health go hand in hand. And if one of them falls off, a lot of the times the next one's following behind it. And so for us, what we're really focused on is how do we attack those obesity related chronic conditions and help drivers make lifestyle changes to lose weight, to manage their diabetes, to prevent diabetes, and get their blood pressure under control as well. Because if we do all of those, a lot of the times everything else falls into place.
Yeah, for sure. And there seems to be a bit more of a focus on health with our younger generation, especially when they're choosing a career. Their health risks, no matter what the job, I guess. But from your perspective, if we make that choice to enter into trucking, what sort of things can we do to reduce those long-term risks associated with that career and be able to check all those boxes for not just the next generation of commercial drivers, but for the current professionals that we heavily rely on today?
Yeah. I love this question. And to me, I'm like very, very, very passionate about how do we get the next generation into this industry. And as someone who is in this millennial Gen Z age group, I can tell you that if the trucking industry does not take physical and mental health more seriously, we are going to have an even bigger issue in the next 10 to 15 years, because people my age, people younger than me, are looking at the current drivers and they have so many options from a career perspective. And if I was looking at a career where statistically I'm going to, by getting my CDL, I get 16 years cut off the back end of my life, why would someone choose, like, why would that be their first choice?
Right.
And I think trucking can make such an amazing career. And I know that's a hard truth. Like, that's not an easy thing to say. And, an executive or someone at a trucking company listening to that, I know that's not like the easiest thing to hear as well. And I don't mean to be like very blunt about it, but I just want to be like super transparent, because I work with an organization down in the United States called Next Generation of Trucking, and they're putting CDL schools into high schools and community colleges. And we're working together because we're talking about physical and mental health during CDL schools so that we can get drivers day one out on the road thinking about their health and having the actionable resources and support to start their career on a healthy note versus having to teach old dogs new trick, right?
Yeah, bringing that awareness in early,
Yeah, exactly. But what you mentioned is every single year, the average driver's age is getting older and older. And I think that's a really big issue as well. And why what we're working with companies is, how do we make sure that if a driver leaves your company, it's because they choose to versus they're forced to out of their health? And there's more and more drivers every single year who are having major medical issues. Their health, down in the States, or someone who does cross-border, they can't pass their DOT physical, or they just physically can't handle the job, and it's a risk of their health is in a poor shape, or they've declined as they've gotten older and older. And I think that there's such a huge opportunity to talk about health, because I can tell you, talking personally with drivers, especially as they get closer and closer to that retirement age, drivers start making this flip where they're like, well, what about life after trucking? What am I going to do? I have a 1-year-old grandchild. I want to be there when they graduate high school, or when they're 2 years old, not just 1-year-old. I need to be taking this more seriously. I'm seeing the trend of health go across North America, but across drivers as well. It's like more and more drivers are thinking about it and trying to find a way to live a healthier life out on the road.
Yeah, no, for sure. When you talk about the diet and the overweight challenges and those other things, I think about when I was driving. I was fairly young and active still then, and so I wasn't overweight, but I was having such issues with sciatic, pain in the lower back and all those from just the sitting, right? And I know ergonomics has come a long way in cab comfort, improved drastically since then. But what tips could you help to provide the drivers of today to say, hey, look, there is health risks from just sitting around. And I know the wallet and the back pocket on the one side, I was reminded of that, to be cautious about doing those kind of things. But what else can I do to help prevent those long-term issues that I'm going to have from just sitting very steady and in a chair of a truck for miles and miles a year?
Yeah, so I'll kind of speak on this in two fronts. The first front is on the physical therapy, looking at injury risk or like musculoskeletal pain risk from sitting in a certain position. I think that there are positions that our body is more natural to do, but if you sit with the most amazing posture for an extended period of time, your body's still going to be like, dude, let's move a little bit. I'm feeling uncomfortable. So one thing that I think they can do is thinking about changing positions every once in a while. I really try to stay away from telling drivers to do anything while they're driving other than drive safely. So our program would never actually recommend this to a driver. But from an ergonomic perspective, I think having multiple positions, and that could be as easy as leaning forward a little bit. Okay, good. Now leaning back a little bit, maybe bending the neck a little bit every once in a while. Like it's as easy as that part. But the other aspect to it is most of the time, right? It depends on the load. It depends on the route the driver's doing. It depends on the type of trucking. But you got to get fuel at some point. You got to take your 30-minute break at some point. You got to get to a customer at some point. Every opportunity that you have, move a little bit. If it's doing some stretches, if it's doing a couple of laps around the truck, if it's doing 2 laps to the bathroom, whatever that is, getting some blood flow is what is going to reduce and help with those musculoskeletal issues. The other aspect that I think is really also important with the movement side of things is some of these safety initiatives where we have these stretching programs, or before you go and unload or you do X, Y, and Z, or if you're a flatbed, jump on the truck, we have these stretches. You should be adding in some of that walking as well before the stretching, because it's what gets your blood flow pumping, especially in December in Canada where it's cold as all get out and people's bodies are stiff. If you just go from sitting all day to go touch your toes, that's better than nothing, but you probably want to do a couple of laps around the truck to warm yourself up before going and trying to touch your toes, especially if you have a 60-year-old driver who maybe is not the fittest person in the world.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a joint mobile routine, right? Getting your joints lubed and moved, moving them around before you start heavy activity or unloading or strapping or tarping and all that other stuff, right? Yeah, you made a good point there. So I guess onto the diet, and then you touched on this a little bit, but I see that a lot of the challenges coming from just having the access to the healthy food on the road, right? And the truck stop food, as to your point earlier, or the snacking. I know when boredom sets in and you're driving, what are you reaching for, right? For me, it was a bag of licorice. That was my way to make it through the night, right? And then hydration too. So how important is it for hydration? And this was a challenge for me. And I know having conversations with other drivers, they feel the same way. If they drink too much, they had to have too many bathroom breaks, which puts them behind schedule and all that other stuff. But I know personally now, years later, after I got out of the truck, how important, hydration is if you want your body to perform, right?
The first thing that I always say, and I tell this to drivers, I think that in our culture as a whole, diet and nutrition has been built up of this all or nothing. You open up TikTok, you scroll for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden there's 10 different diets that are arguing on why the other one sucks and why theirs is better. And you're like, I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing. And at the end of the day, most people know we should be eating less Twinkies and more fruits and vegetables. We should be eating maybe less double fried chicken and more lean protein that is not deep fried, maybe baked, all these other things. And the other aspect to it is I ask drivers all the time, do you want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger? Are you trying to be a professional bodybuilder? And from 5 years in the industry, I've only had one driver who told me, like, yes, I'm actually trying to be. And he is jacked. He is way bigger than I am. It's pretty cool to see. But most people, especially the drivers who I think we all, have in our head, they want to lose 15 to 20 pounds. They want to have more energy. They want to be there for their kids. They want to feel more energized, feel better, both physically and mentally. And they just want to maybe control their blood pressure, control their diabetes more. And I continually surprise people as we work with them and our coaches work with them, the impact that small habit-based changes done on a consistent basis can have on someone's health. And I'll use a very, very blown out of proportion example of one of the first drivers that I met who I'm like, I got into the trucking industry, like I said, like not really knowing anyone in trucking. So my first example, because this driver in the clinic told me, Facebook groups, go meet drivers on Facebook groups. Well, I'll tell you what, a physical therapist from the middle of the United States who's never talked to a truck driver outside of a physical therapy clinic, jumping into a trucker only Facebook group is like the Wild West. It was awesome because I was just very intrigued, and I started posting in them and just asking, hey, would anyone talk to me? And I got 20 drivers to jump on a call, talk to me, and they were all excited because I was just genuinely curious and like asking them questions, and no judgment, nothing like that. But one of those drivers I started working with as a personal trainer, so just helping them. It was like the start of Offshift in this whole journey. And his issue was he was overweight, probably obese if you looked at his BMI. He was diabetic, couldn't control his blood sugar. And we start talking about, all right, what do you do for physical activity? What's your diet? Okay, what do you drink out on the road? This dude drinks 24 Pepsis a day, 12 packs of Pepsi every single day he drives.
Wow. Yeah.
We're talking hundreds of grams of sugar, thousands of calories just getting slurped down while driving. He probably had a pee issue as well, probably stopped a decent amount, but it was a bad pee issue because it was all sugar coming out instead of clear hydrated urine. And I was like, dude, I don't care about anything else. All we need to do is switch you from regular Pepsi to diet Pepsi. Like, let's just start there. Let's cut out close to thousands of grams of sugar a day.
Right.
And all we did was that. And he lost like 30 pounds over the first 3 months, and his blood sugar was under control. That alone is
Wow.
We switched to diet soda, and then we slowly added in a water between. Took the approach of you drink one beer, now you're supposed to drink a water, then you drink another beer. Well, we did that with diet soda and soda so we could ease him into being more hydrated. And that alone, we didn't try to do this fancy workout plan. We actually didn't change much on his nutrition. The funny part about this whole health thing is if you change one thing, all of a sudden there's like this trickle down effect where if people are like, I'm working out more or I'm eating healthier, they all of a sudden want to make changes in other aspects of their life so they're not ruining the impact that they're having. So yeah, there were some diet changes. I think he went on some walks throughout the week, but all I was focused on was cutting down the amount of sugar this dude was drinking.
Right.
And it had such a big impact and changed his life. I mean, he was going down a really bad path of not being able to control his diabetes because of that. And so that's an example of like very small changes, and not small from the impact, because it's huge impact, but small from the grand scheme of I'm not handing him a meal plan saying, hey, throw everything out of your pantry or out of your truck away, flip your whole lifestyle upside down. You can only eat things that are green and grow out of the ground. It's like, no, we have to be realistic, because if anyone flips their whole lifestyle upside down with a meal plan, it's them holding on for dear life for like a week or two, and then they fall off. And so
And then
many
there's that
people,
sense of failure, right, at the end of it.
exactly. And like
Yeah.
everyone over the age of like 30 has a stack in their closet of failed diet attempts. And it feels like every time you fail, it feels even harder or more like this is impossible to do. And you add trucking into the equation, and then it makes it even more challenging. And so that's been the approach on the diet side we've taken and had a lot of success with it.
We especially the dreaded C word, consistency, but we saw that with another C word, COVID, is when drivers didn't necessarily even have access to food, or they didn't have the same truck stops and restaurants were closed. So yeah, it's just so important that they even have those resources available to them to be able to eat out on the road.
Well, and what I'll add to that is for us, we take a habit-based approach. So let's say we want to eat more protein, right? Protein is very important. Most people as we age are not eating enough protein. And it's one of the reasons why the 90-year-old grandma gets stuck on the toilet, because she's not strong enough. She doesn't have the muscle mass to get off of the toilet. And it's a big issue with quality of life as we get older, because there's a fancy term called sarcopenia, which is Father Time's natural process of as we get older, you lose muscle mass. And so there's two different ways that you can push it back or stop it from happening. And it's being physically active, resistance training and exercising, and then it's eating more protein. So for one of the things, it's, hey, let's eat more protein. And that might start with, let's add protein to breakfast. And for a driver, we don't just say add protein to breakfast. We say add protein at breakfast. And if you're at the truck stop, here's exactly what to grab. Or if you're at whatever fast food restaurant you have access to, here's the best option for you. And anywhere a driver goes, I don't care where it is in the world, anywhere, any restaurant, any truck stop, there is a healthier option. And it might not be the healthiest option, but there's a healthier option. And a driver who picks the healthier option every single day for 20 years of their career is going to be a completely different person than the driver who says, screw it, there's nothing available. I'll get the Big Mac again. Oh yeah, let's supersize it. Yeah, okay, I'll get a large Coke with it. And just say screw it, right? And so for us, it's yes. Am I pissed off that all of the truck stops don't have the healthiest options and there's a lack of access? 100%. But am I going to let that be the reason why I just say all these drivers, well, you can't do anything about it? It's circumstances. I'm sorry. No.
Exactly. We keep going back to that word diet, and I just don't, for me personally, diets don't work. It's really about lifestyle, right? It's, get rid of the word diet and let's have a change in lifestyle. And, you talk about protein-based foods and all that and muscle. And I've heard someone say a term, muscle knows no age, right? And when you talk about the injuries that are all too common in our industry today, we talk about a lot of back injuries being the top of the list for drivers, slip, trips, and falls, and those kind of things. Like, what kind of exercises would you suggest that we can do either in the cab, in the bunk, or on the side of the truck that will help strengthen our bodies to protect us against those kind of injuries?
Yeah, the crazy thing about that is that there is tons of research that shows that it's not even this magic exercise or this specific routine, but there's research that shows a third of all musculoskeletal injuries can be prevented by just consistent physical activity. It doesn't matter. That could be gardening. That could be going for a walk. That could be doing a stretching routine. It doesn't matter. It's getting them active. And the process of them being active reduces musculoskeletal injuries by 33%, which is a crazy statistic on its own. So now you then talk about how do you fit this into their routine, right? And how do you give them something structured, because people need structure to do it, right? And they need something. And so for us, I think stretching can be a great opportunity, right? That's really an easy point for us as a starting point of stretching routines. I can tell you that our most popular program for all of our drivers are inside the truck programs where they can do it right in the back of their cab. We have videos showing them exactly how to do it in their cab. We also have outside of the truck with it, showing them how to do it outside of the truck and turn their truck into a gym type of situation. Then we also have stuff at home if they want to do it right in their living room on home time, or if they're home every night or home, a couple of days a week. But what I'll say is stretching is amazing. Body weight exercises are awesome. And a resistance band is the best piece of equipment that you can do, because you can wrap it all up and put it into the back of your cab, and it doesn't turn into a 20-pound flying saucer if you slam on the brakes with a dumbbell in the back of your cab.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what I would recommend. And for us, when we're working with a company, and this is maybe not so positioned as, hey, we're going to cut down work comp claims, but it's more so positioned as, how do we help any member that jumps into our program get into a consistent routine of being physically active? We have different joint-specific mobility programs, because most people over the age of 30 wake up with some type of ache or pain. If it's their low back, if it's their shoulder, if it's their hip, whatever it is. And so we pair our coaches with some mobility programs that have joint-specific exercises that have been built out. If Doug comes to me and says, I can't exercise, I can't do this because my back's bothering me or my knees bothering me. Okay, sweet. We have an algorithm that our coaches follow to make sure there's no red flags, or it's like something that we need to send them to a physio or get them extra help. But if it's just an ache or a pain that we all naturally have, well, here, why don't you try this program? And a lot of the times doing these types of things and getting them more physically active increases mobility, lowers that pain, and decreases the likelihood that an achy low back today turns into something much bigger and much more expensive for the company tomorrow.
Well, that's, when you talked about mental health earlier, when you're in pain and you're suffering and you're stiff and sore all the time, you're trying to do a job. you're under those stresses of making the timelines and all that. Then you're fighting the pain. That messes with you mentally, right?
And you're distracted behind the wheel, right?
Yeah, you're a distraction, and you think that you're focused, but when you're focused on that lower back pain, yeah, your focus goes to that versus being on the road. So very good points. Yeah, no, for sure. You touched on some of the more serious health concerns, like those chronic diseases that you mentioned, the alarming statistics about 16 years being knocked off the average life expectancy. And man, that hurts to hear. And I know those are some really upsetting numbers to hear, especially when you're thinking about getting into the industry. But really, I think what I hear you saying is that you focus on those little changes to your diet, not making huge momentum shifts all at once. Make those, hey, maybe it's one sugar instead of two in your double, right? Maybe it's a single, and you start working at those little things, and it's going to make a big difference come the end of the week, right? And get out, get those exercises, get moving, get those joints active before you start into those heavy lifting and unloading. And that's going to really pay dividends later in life, so that you can enjoy those times with your grandkids when you do get to the age, right?
Exactly. And what I'll say to that is a few things. Number one being, the 16 years is really hard to hear. It hits you like right in the chest, but it doesn't have to be the status quo. And all of these are lifestyle based, where tomorrow you can start down the path and make a huge difference of making these lifestyle changes and not be a part of that statistic, right? It is very, very possible. And it sounds like, Doug, you were a great example when you were out on the road doing that. And then the other aspect that I think is really important from a long-term consistency standpoint is to not let yourself be your worst enemy and focus on progress, not perfection. So many people get on this roll of they're on a streak, you're doing great, and then life punches you in the face, and then you fall off for a day, two, maybe a week, and then you're like, well, I lost everything. I better just give up. I'm done for. And it's like, look, the whole point of this whole game of health is to figure out a balancing act of how you can do this for the rest of your life, right? And that's going to be different for every single person. But the goal is that you just figure out where your baseline is right now, and how do you just start taking small steps up the stairs, right? And it might take you a couple of weeks, a couple of months, maybe years to take that next step up. But if you're really focusing and really pushing towards just continual improvement around that, and not giving up when life hits you, or you have an 8-hour delay at a customer and all of a sudden you're driving at 3:00 in the morning instead of a normal routine, and you feel like you're in survival mode, I think you're going to be way better off than the person who just gives up because one day happens. And you don't have to hate yourself to live a healthy life. There's a nice balance. My wife and I enjoy some ice cream every single night, and it's because the rest of my meals are healthy and I have a balance of it. So you don't have to be this perfect angel that you don't even look at sweets, or you don't look at the bag of licorice or Doritos when you go to the truck stop. It's finding a balancing there.
Well, that's a great message, Dr. Mark. And again, thanks so much for being here. I'll throw it back to you, Kelsey.
I am questioning my Twinkie intake, but I am going to stick with the progress, not perfection mantra in that case. And I mean, as you both know, drivers are so important to everyone, right? Without drivers, we have nothing. You guys, we have covered a lot of ground. So much fascinating and interesting information. For our listeners, just remember to check out the show notes, because we'll be linking to a bunch of info that both Mark and Doug have covered today. So let's just wind it down a bit. Mark, thank you so much. But is there anything else that you want to add, or a message that you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, I think for the companies out there, I think you have a really amazing position to change the life of your employees, and also open up this huge area of risk reduction that so many people have just swept under the rug for years and years. And I always say, put the health back in health and safety, right? A lot of the times it's just talking about the safety side of things. And I think that is grossly under talked about, is the health component of it. And I think this is an opportunity to do that, and not look at, I've tried in the past and it didn't work. Because if you are in that position, I would truly take a step back and look at what you tried, and was it really trucking specific? And if you were a driver and you got that program, would you be like, wow, this really fits my lifestyle, this really gets me? because 99% of the time it doesn't. And if you ever want to work together, Offshift is my company, and you can go to offshift.ai or find me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure it'll be on the show notes as well.
I am going to write down, put the health back in health and safety as a mantra.
There you go.
And yeah, as Mark mentioned, we'll make sure that you guys have access to those in our show notes. Wrapping up, Doug, is there anything you'd like to add?
Again, just to close, Dr. Mark, thanks again for the valuable insights. It's nice to know that while the challenges in this industry for our health are significant, there are manageable steps that drivers can take towards improving their health. So again, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. Look forward to seeing the continued success that you're having, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you both for having me on. And I think that this series as a whole is amazing that you're even bringing light to it. So I appreciate you guys doing your part as well.
Thank you so much, both of you, for coming. I suddenly feel the need to go for a walk, but before I do so, thank you, listeners, and we look forward to hanging out with you for part 3 of our Road to Wellness series, where we delve deeper into the importance of sleep and fatigue management for commercial drivers. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions or comments about the Road to Wellness series or our steering change episodes in general, please reach out on our Instagram at AMTA_CA or LinkedIn and Facebook at Alberta Motor Transport Association. And if you have any questions for Doug, myself, or Dr. Mark Manera, feel free to share those as well. Stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change Podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change Podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Do you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change Podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change Mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.